Olá a todos, muito bom dia, muito obrigado pela presença aqui na Fundação. Nós vamos dar início à 5ª Conferência FAPESP de 2026, cujo tema é Anemia, falciforme, da origem genética à busca pela cura, conferência que será proferida pelo professor Jacques Elion, da Université Paris Cité, a quem agradecemos a presença na FAPESP. E para compor a mesa de abertura, gostaria de convidar o professor Marco Antônio Zago, presidente da Fundação. Professor Oswaldo Bafa, que é coordenador da comissão organizadora das conferências FAPESP. O nosso conferencista, professor Jacques Elion. E o professor da Faculdade de Medicina de Ribeirão Preto, professor Rodrigo Calado, que hoje será o nosso moderador e debatedor. Gostaria de lembrar que esse evento está sendo gravado e será disponibilizado posteriormente no YouTube da agência FAPESP. Também agradecer a presença da presidente da Associação de Anemia Falciforme do Estado de São Paulo, Berenice. Obrigado. Reforçar também nosso agradecimento à Academia de Ciências do Estado de São Paulo, parceiro para a divulgação deste evento. E, prosseguindo com o nosso programa, passamos a palavra ao professor Marco Antônio Zago, presidente da Fundação.
Okay, good morning. Welcome to July's conference, FAPESP conference. The subject of today's conference is something that we share with France. Thus, it is not surprising that our guest speaker, comes from Paris and has lived also in Brazil for a long period. Brazil and France share many things. But one of them is that the more frequent genetic disease in both countries is sickle cell anemia, or as they call it, drepanocytose, or anemia falciforme. Jacques Elion, honorary professor of biochemistry and molecular biology at the Université Paris Cité, has developed a distinguished career at the intersection of molecular genetics, hematology, and translational medicine. His principal scientific contribution has been to help to change our understanding of sickle cell disease. The disorder that was originally seen mainly as an abnormality of hemoglobin is indeed a complex systemic condition involving red cell biology, vascular adhesion, inflammation, coagulation, and modifiers. I met him for the first time in 1980, when, under the sponsorship of CAPS, I visited Dominique Laby at the Hôpital. Laby was going into retirement that same day when I arrived. And then she introduced me to Jacques Elion, Rajagopal Krishnamurti, our common friend and collaborator, Krishna. Young faculty members then, so young anymore. At the time, they were both very young faculty members associated at the time with the Université Paris Cité, and they were moving to a new hospital they were moving the research group to a new hospital, Hospital Robert Debré. So that meeting developed into a Franco-Brazilian collaboration lasting for many decades. Elion served as head of the Department of Medical Genetics at Robert Debré University Hospital, which hosted one of the laboratories responsible for France's national newborn screening program for sickle cell disease. He also conducted the research in certain units associated with the National Institute of Transfusion Insurance and the University Hospital of Guadalupe. He has also held a visiting professor at the University of São Paulo and developed collaborations across Brazil, Caribe, Sub-Saharan Africa, India, and the Índia. What was his contribution to science? The most important component of Jacques' life work focuses on the pathophysiology and clinical variability of sickle cell disease. Although the disorder originates from a single mutation, its severity varies substantially among individuals. Bone collaborator helped establish that this variability reflects a combination of genetic and environmental factors, so nature and nurture. His widely cited review, Pathophysiological Insights in Sickle Cell Disease, synthesized many of those developments and helped make conceptual framework accessible to both basic researchers and clinicians. The second major contribution concerned hydroxyurea. The drug was initially used because it increases fetal hemoglobin production. In this way, it reduces hemoglobin S. But Elion and colleagues demonstrate that its effects are broader. And his publications additionally extended into population genetics and molecular microbiology. And in recent years, he has remained engaged in global strategies for improving sickle cell outcomes. So I think it seems reasonable to say that Elion's work impact lies less in a single isolated discovery, but especially in the construction of an integrated set of knowledge. For those who like numbers, he has published more than 400 articles, received more than 15,000 citations, and has an H index of 66. More important, I think, than the numbers is that he continues to be cited in the literature, so he had a lasting effect on science. And his partnership with our research group in Ribeirão Preto, supported by CAPES, FAPESP, USP, involved the research project and exchange of doctoral and postdoctoral researchers between France and Brazil. His appointment as a visiting professor at USP demonstrates, I think, that this relationship went beyond occasional co-authorships and became a sustained program of scientific cooperation and capacity building. Our joint publications fall into three principal groups. The first examined the molecular diversity of beta-globin cluster and sickle cell haplotypes. These studies refined the use of haplotypes for reconstructing the origin and dissemination of the sickle cell mutation. A second group investigated the distribution of clinically relevant hemostatic polymorphisms for factor V Leiden, factor V Cambridge, prothrombin, methyltetrahydrofolate reductase, and factor 13 across population with different ancestral backgrounds in Brazil. And the third group addressed the human population history and ancestry. Later work extended the collaboration to human evolutionary genetics, including variation of PAX9, and finally returned to sickle cell therapeutics through a 2014 study showing that hydroxyurea modulates components regulating adenosine levels in blood cells. The significance of our collaboration, therefore, extends beyond the publication counts. It joined the French expertise in hemoglobin molecular genetics and sickle cell pathophysiology with Brazilian strengths in clinical hematology, population genetics, and the study of highly admixed populations. It also created opportunities for younger researchers, strengthening the institutional relationship between France and Brazil, and generated findings relevant to both fundamental human genetics and diseases of a major importance in Brazil and in France. Thus, I hope that you can evaluate how happy I am to welcome Jacques Elion here today. 46 years after I met him and Krishna that day at the Hospital Cochin pour Royal. Welcome, Jacques. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, professor Zago. Ouviremos a seguir o professor Oswaldo Bafa, representando a comissão organizadora das conferências FAPESP.
Bom dia a todos, bem-vindos a mais uma conferência FAPESP. Sempre bom ver a casa cheia, presente aqui para interagir, discutir mais sobre ciência, pensar em novos projetos, encaminhar novos pedidos para a Fundação. Certamente vão ser bem acolhidos. A comissão que coordena essas conferências se dedica a escolher uma agenda bastante rica. Eu tenho a impressão que vão mostrar daqui a pouquinho o nosso programa desse semestre. Já? Está colocando. Bom, a gente tem uma programação já até o final do ano, que vai tocar em vários pontos atuais e relevantes. A próxima conferência é sobre computação quântica. Vamos ter uma pesquisadora aqui que atua no Itaú, nessa área. Depois, em setembro, vamos ter uma conferência sobre digitalização de monumentos históricos, como a gente pode criar um gêmeo digital do Museu do Ipiranga e acompanhar como esse gêmeo digital vai evoluindo, que está ali do professor Marcelo Balzani. No dia 2 de outubro, vamos ter uma conferência sobre IA e publicações, que é um assunto também quente no momento. Depois, 30 de outubro, vamos ter uma conferência sobre solidão, redes sociais e doenças crônicas não transmissíveis. Doença mental, a gente sabe que é um assunto também do momento. E, no período de 9 a 13 de dezembro, nós vamos ter as escolas interdisciplinares FAPESP. Muito em breve, vocês vão ver no site da FAPESP o edital dessas escolas. São 2 escolas interdisciplinares, uma na área de ciências exatas, naturais, engenharias e medicina, e outra na área de humanidades, ciências sociais e artes. É uma iniciativa pioneira da FAPESP, talvez única no Brasil e uma das poucas no mundo, de juntar pesquisadores pós-doutorandos que atuam em diferentes áreas para conversar, se conhecer, criar colaborações e, com isso, olhar para o futuro. Peço a todos que olhem com carinho para essas escolas. E, finalmente, vamos ter, no dia 27 de novembro, uma atividade sobre cérebro-máquina por um professor de Portugal que atua na área de psicologia. Bem, falar depois do professor Zago é sempre muito difícil, porque eu digo que ele praticamente esgota o assunto, mas eu vou me atrever aqui a adicionar um grão de sal. Sei que tem aqui muitos hematologistas famosos, né, e importantes, como o professor Zago, e eu queria dizer que esse tema é tão importante que interessou até os físicos. Bom, como vai interessar os físicos, né? Então, eu sou físico, e comecei a minha carreira na área dos anos 70. E naquela época, se estudava muito física da matéria, física do estado sólido, que hoje é chamado física da matéria condensada. Essa área, física do estado sólido, tinha começado nos anos 50 e deu pelo menos 2 grandes frutos, né? Que são os semicondutores, que deu origem aos transistores, circuitos integrados e tudo que a gente carrega no bolso hoje, e a supercondutividade, que permite fazer exames de ressonância magnética com uma qualidade incrível, nos anos 50. Nos anos 70, quando eu estava estudando, laser era o tema da época. E para ter laser, você precisa ter um cristal, um meio óptico que você ativa, ele produz luz, e aí, enfim, temos o laser, que hoje tem um laser pointer. E para produzir laser, a gente precisava produzir cristais e dopar os cristais. Então, os físicos trabalhavam com cristais muito simples, né? Cristal cloreto de sódio, sódio, cloro, uma rede cúbica, se colocava uma impureza, a cor mudava, podia produzir laser de uma cor, de outra, etc. Bom, aí lá pelos anos 59, Andrew fez a estrutura da mioglobina. Logo depois, o Peretz fez da hemoglobina. Então, os físicos já estavam cansados de estudar aqueles cristalzinhos simples e viram esse cristalzão, né? Uma molécula biológica cristalizada, conhecendo a estrutura dela a nível atômico. Muito bem, começou-se a usar aquelas técnicas que tinham sido desenvolvidas para a matéria condensada na área da física. E, obviamente, né, a hemoglobina foi uma molécula extremamente importante para a biofísica molecular. Primeiro que qualquer físico consegue preparar, né? Eu me lembro que a gente ia nos bancos de sangue, pedia a bolsa de sangue vencida, era a época que não existia AIDS, né? Então, a gente pegava a bolsa, aí produzia o hemolizado, separava as hemoglobinas, etc. Depois ia cristalizar e depois ia fazer experimentos, né, de ressonância magnética de espinho eletrônico, ótica, etc, etc. Então, essas hemoglobinas, elas foram uma plataforma fundamental para o desenvolvimento das técnicas de biologia molecular, biofísica, que estão aí hoje e que servem, né, várias outras áreas. Logicamente que depois de estudar a hemoglobina mais comum, né, aí o que tem de diferente? Temos a hemoglobina falciforme, temos a beta, temos a talassemia. Então, o que pode acontecer aí? Zurich, né? Zago fez um trabalho com a hemoglobina Zurich. Mudou um aminoácido. O que esse aminoácido faz na cadeia? Qual é a implicação que ela tem? Então, essa história do binômio forma e função, né, foi bastante reforçada com esses experimentos. De modo que eu estou extremamente ansioso para assistir a palestra do professor Jacques Elion e ver onde nós estamos hoje, né? Certamente evoluímos muito com a genética e outras técnicas. Então, muito obrigado a todos e muito bem-vindo, professor Jacques.
Muito obrigado, professor Bafa. A seguir, ouviremos o nosso moderador, o professor Rodrigo Calado.
Bom dia a todas e todos. Bonjour, Professor Elion. Good morning. I think that Professor Zago and Professor Bafa made my life much easier now to introduce Professor Elion and the topic here. So maybe it made it a little bit more difficult for me to find something in addition to say about our speaker as well as the topic. What I probably want to add here to this conference, or as an introduction to this conference, is that this talk is a very good example of why science matters and why investing in basic science has important significance to our lives, and especially for patient care. Sickle cell anemia or sickle cell disorders were extremely important for us to understand how the genes are regulated, and this was the first time that we found that actually a disease had a molecular basis from Linus Pauling a while ago, and how the genes are actually regulated in our human genome that came from studying sickle cell disease, as well as how inflammation causes damage to different organs in patients, as well as Professor Zago said, why one single mutation that every patient with sickle cell anemia carries causes such diversity in phenotype. So some patients, fortunately, have a very mild disease, and other patients have very severe with stroke. Others have pulmonary disorder. So it's so diverse. And we get this information from basic science that comes from scientists, as Professor Elion is studying sickle cell disease. And it translates into patient care. So if I'm seeing here our colleagues from the Escola Paulista or from USP in São Paulo, USP in Ribeirão Preto, Unicamp, and others, and if we treat our patients with sickle cell disease better today, it's because of how these genetic bases or how the disease works, the understanding from that translated into patient care. But still, unfortunately, we are not still happy with the care that we give to patients. There's still a long road to go, so we still have to invest in science and research to understand better how the disease works and how we can provide or invent different therapies for patients with sickle cell disease. So in this universe of molecular biology and sickle cell anemia is the contribution of Professor Elion, who is a professor at Université Paris Cité and research at Hôpital Robert Rebré that assists or sees the patients with sickle cell anemia in Paris. And one of the peculiarities of his research is that he was able to integrate the observation, the molecular genetic observation from patients from the Caribbean, from Brazil, from India, from Africa, as well as those also in Europe, to help understand better how this disease works. And so I won't delay anymore, and I think that it's much better if we have Professor Elion to talk about his research himself. Thank you very much.
Well, bom dia a todos. This is the only sentence I will use in Portuguese. I am sorry, because I will switch to English. My first words will be to thank all the organizers, and particularly Professor Zago, who invited me to this prestigious cycle of conferences, the FAPESP conferences. And I am always very glad to come to Brazil because this is a country that I learned to love, you know, with all these years of collaboration which were described by Professor Zago. I must say that I'm very happy today to see several known faces here in the audience, and this is a great pleasure for me. And actually, in addition to the links that were between France and Brazil that were mentioned by Professor Zago, I would mention that our countries have a common border. Nobody thinks of that, but French Guiana has a border with Brazil. So after this, I will start my talk. And I will not go over the title, which has been said before, and I will go straight to the topic. So a little bit of history. Sickle cell anemia is due to one single mutation, but this single mutation occurred in the history, probably in the Neolithic period, that is to say about 6,000 years before Christ, and at the beginning of the agricultural stage of human development. And but this single mutation occurred in different sites and independently. As you can see on the map of Africa, there are at least 3 sites of origin for this mutation. One in Western Africa, in the Senegal region, in green. One in the region of the Gulf of Benin, here. Which through migration through the Saharan desert and slave trade migrated to the Mediterranean basin, including oriental end of this basin, and one here in blue in Central Africa. The fourth origin was in India here. And the Arabic Peninsula has a very interesting situation because the sickle gene, is present there, and in the western part of the country, it comes from the Benin area, and in the eastern part of the country, it comes from India. Now, from this different origin of the mutation, as you know, the mutation spread by the slave trades. I would like to mention here on the right the Eastern trade to the Muslim world, which is always sometimes forgotten, and which started before the slave trade to the Americas, and which lasted longer and with a higher number of deported people. Then, of course, we do have the transatlantic trade from Western Africa, and this trade affected massively transfer from slaves from Western Africa to the Caribbean region and to Brazil. Now, of course, you've all heard of the modern economical migrations and forced displacement from wars and conflict that still contribute to the displacement of people carrying the sickle mutation. If we look a little bit more at the situation in Brazil and in the Caribbean, you see that there are a large number of patients as measured by the incidence of newborns with sickle cell anemia. And in Brazil, where there is a newborn screening program, which we'll talk about a little bit later, you see the distribution of the patients, and you see that, of course, as you know, the incidence is higher in the Nordeste part of the country in Bahia state, and the lower is here in the south, in the state of Rio Grande do Sul. Now, if you look at the global distribution of sickle cell disease nowadays, this map represents the incidence of the disease, and the purpose of this slide is to show you that it is a worldwide burden, and then in our days, more than 300,000 newborns per year are observed worldwide, and 90% of these patients are being born in low-income countries. Also, to give you an image of the importance of this mutation in the world population, it is estimated that the 5% of the world population is a carrier of the mutation. So this is really a world global problem. And finally, I would like to have this sentence, which is very important to have in mind. Sickle cell disease is not just a black disease, because as I mentioned, we find it in India, but also all around the Mediterranean basin, and in Greece, Italy, Portugal, for instance, there are patients with totally white skin and white background. Now, what I want to say is that it is not a stabilized problem. It is, on the contrary, an increasing burden. And this map here is what is called a cartogram scaled by sickle cell incidence. So it means that the world map is distorted to show what is the importance of newborns with sickle cell disease in the world. So as you can see, there are three major countries which are the main contributors to newborns affected with sickle cell disease, and they are Nigeria in Africa, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and also India. And this map, as you see from calculations and predictive epidemiology, is going to change, and the prevalence of new cases is going to increase for the number of about 300,000, which I mentioned before, to more than 400,000 around year 2050. This is another cartogram, distorted cartogram, which shows that where the needs are the greatest, in Africa, in India, then the resources are least. And if you see here, most of the wealthy countries are concentrated in Europe and in North America, whereas there are approximately 100,000 patients in the US and about 50,000 patients in Europe. And the countries and part of the world with the highest incidence here, when looked at for financial capabilities, have almost disappeared. You see here the African continent is non-existent, as is a little bit less, but still India. Now, we can say is that there are really two worlds for sickle cell disease. And if we looked, for instance, at the life expectancies of babies born with sickle cell disease, and compare the poor countries with the wealthy countries from birth to 15 years of age. The the percentage of survival in the low-income countries is about 10%, whereas it is 99% at 10 years in the rich countries. Whereas these rich countries represent only 10% of the patients, and the low-income countries represent 80% of the patients. Now, in the north, obviously, median life expectancy of sickle cell children is steadily increasing. And you have here a curve showing the life expectancy from about 1910, when the disease was described, we will say later, to nowadays. And you see this sharp angle here in the increase of life expectancy, and this corresponds to the awareness of the disease in the years 1970s, and mainly with the establishment of newborn screening programs in the 80s, accompanied by comprehensive care. This progress in life expectancy is impressive, but interestingly, it results mostly from rather simple interventions. I mentioned newborn screening, and newborn screening allows to manage and prevent infections in the newborns by penicillin prophylaxis and vaccinations. And then additional means have been added to that to participate to this increase of life expectancy, which is the introduction of hydroxycarbamide. We'll come to that later in 1995. And also a very important test, which is transcranial Doppler in 1998, sorry. Also to the rational transfusion therapy. Thus, extended newborn screening and establishment of comprehensive care programs for affected children must be a priority. If we look at the history and the chronology of the newborn screening project for sickle cell disease, the first projects were started in the USA in the 1970s after the fight of the black population for the civil rights. Then awareness of the disease was acquired in the population and the government, and but then it was followed by programs in France in the 1980s, as well as in the United Kingdom. Jamaica also developed a very extensive program for newborn screenings. Guadeloupe, which is a French department, was started the screening program in 1984. And then there were pioneering pilot programs in Africa, and the two which must be cited in the one in Benin and the one in Ghana. And of course, I have to mention Brazil, which started its newborn screening program and comprehensive care in 2010, and which in a matter of 4 years, which is a wonderful achievement, generalized this program to the 27, if I'm not mistaken, states of Brazil. Finally, of course, we have to mention India, as I said, which started its program, which is not universal, but regional in 2009. So in 2025, universal screening for sickle cell disease takes place in the US, Brazil, the UK, France, Spain, the Netherlands, and Germany, and pilot programs are observed in more than 10 sub-Saharan African countries. Now, these programs for newborn screening should be helped in their development by innovative methods for screening newborns. The conventional methods being isoelectric focusing, high-pressure liquid chromatography, HPLC, or capillary electrophoresis for a very long time. And then these innovative methods, which are now developed, include high-throughput methods such as mass spectrometry, and of a very different aspect, point-of-care tests. Mass spectrometry, for instance, allows to test 200,000 to 300,000 tests per year, which is a very large number, but it has to be concentrated in a very specialized reference laboratory, whereas point-of-care tests is tests that the nurse or the midwife can do when the baby is born. So it is very interesting to see these two types of methods which can be applied depending on the condition of local condition of the newborn, where the newborn is arrives to the world. Okay. Still, morbidity is very high, and we certainly should be able to do better. Morbidity is very high in adults, where we observe premature deaths, but still in young children we do have severe complication. So how could we try to change this and to do better? It's certainly through a better understanding of sickle cell physiopathology that will open new ways of understanding and of developing care, drugs, and management. So, as mentioned earlier, in particular by Dr. Baffa, there was a long road understanding the disease. You know well that the first medical description has been published in the 1910 by Herrick, and then Emil in 1970 discovered sickle cell sickling, which is illustrated here. And then in 1949, Linus Pauling discovered the hemoglobin S, which is responsible of the disease, and his historical paper is called Sickle Cell Anemia, a molecular disease. So this is the first example of molecular disease, and this is the first time that term molecular disease has been used. And as you know now, many diseases have molecular basis. That same year, Neil described the genetic inheritance of the disease. Further on in 1956, Ingram described the nature of the mutation, which is a substitution of glutamic acid to a valine in the beta chain of hemoglobin. Perutz, which was mentioned earlier, was the first to describe the three-dimensional structure of hemoglobin, and then together with Eaton and several other scientists, they described the basic molecular mechanism of the disease, which is the polymerization of hemoglobin S in a hypoxic condition that leads to deformation, which is called sickling of the red cells, which is illustrated here, and of the vaso-occlusive crisis. So the effect of hemoglobin S polymerization on red blood cells is to rigidify the cells and to deform the cells I just mentioned, but also to render them fragile. So these two properties give rise to vaso-occlusion, which is responsible of the acute complications, such as painful crisis of dactylitis in the younger children, acute chest syndrome, and splenic sequestration. And but hemolysis, which was for a long time neglected by the scientists, they concentrated the work on vaso-occlusion. Hemolysis, in fact, is a major and central player of the pathophysiology of sickle cell disease, because free hemoglobin S and free heme in the blood delivered by the lysis of the red cells are very, very toxic, and they are the cause of cell activation, cell adhesion, inflammation, and vasculopathy, which now are recognized as the main factor of the pathophysiology of the disease. Now, from a rather simple molecular mechanism, which was described by Perus and other scientists, we came nowadays to a whole very complex vascular ecosystem in which hemolysis is the central part. Here you see the red blood cell, which is lysed and liberates into the blood hemoglobin S and heme. And hemolysis results from heme and S driven inflammation, cell activation, cell-cell interactions, cell adhesion to the endothelium, and nitric oxide scavenging, which is part of the vascular dysfunction. Now I will go very rapidly to a slide summing up these different events, and I will not go into the details, but I want to show you this to illustrate the complexity of the pathophysiological phenomenon. So not only the red cells is part of the pathophysiology, but then the monocytes are involved. Again, the monocytes, the macrophage, even out of the vascular bed, in the surrounding of the bed, are actors of the pathophysiology. The neutrophils, again, which adhere to the endothelium and interact with the sickle cells. The neutrophils, again, the platelets participate also. So the innate natural killer cells, which are cells of the immunological system, intervene. The eosinophils, another type of white blood cells, are involved, and even the mast cells, which are outside of the vascular system but in the periphery, might participate to the pain generation that is a typical symptom of the disease. And still, very recently, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, a new actor was involved. Hematopoiesis joins the dance, you know, from anemia to deleterious neutrophil overproduction. Sarah L. Hoss in our laboratory and some other teams have shown that the hematopoiesis that is the production of blood cells, is affected. There is an ineffective erythropoiesis, which through a cascade of different molecular signaling, which is disturbed, results in the upregulation of apoptosis and then the reduction of the production of the red cells in particular. But also very more recently, there is not only ineffective but dyserythropoiesis, meaning that the erythropoiesis, which leads to the three main type of red blood cells, is shifted, towards a production of neutrophil to neutrophils. And neutrophils, the high count of neutrophils in the red blood cells is a good indicator of severity, because neutrophils are really central to the pathophysiological system. So we start from a single mutation, but a polysystemic disease. The common manifestations being increased susceptibility to infection, which is the leading cause of childhood mortality. And second one is severe painful crisis, the vaso-occlusive event, and hemolytic anemia. And on the right part here is summarized the different other complications which affect almost all the organs of the human body. So actually there is a highly complete and intricate pathophysiology that involves mechanism already known in some other common pathologies, as inflammation and so on. So now the problem is how to address such a complexity in terms of treatment, because this is what is important for the patients. We can, of course, design novel, specifically targeted drugs, and there are examples that I will show in the next slide. But also, we can repurpose old drugs that are already known to act on some of these more general mechanisms observed in other pathologies. Now, there is a time scale of the development of the use of drugs, either coming from de novo disease-specific drug development or from approved and currently repurposed drugs. The first example, actually, of a repurposed drug is hydroxyurea, because hydroxyurea was used to treat some specific types of leukemias. And then now it is used and has shown its efficacy in sickle cell disease. And that was in 1985. Concerning the de novo disease-specific drug, there has been a lag of more than 2 decades to find drugs that could be interesting in using in sickle cell anemia. Voxelotor, for instance, was approved in 2019, sorry, and it is an inhibitor of hemoglobin S polymerization, and crisantumab was also approved as a drug for treating sickle cell patient in 2019, and it is an anti-P-selectin adhesion molecule. Very unfortunately, the effect on the long term of these two drugs was not demonstrated. And actually, these only two drugs that have been developed over 20 years since the discovery and understanding of the mutation have been erased from the treatment and have lost the agreement for utilization in sickle cell disease. Whereas if we look at the other approach, which is repurposed drugs, then a new one, which is glutamine, has been approved in 2017, and it is in use, and some other potentially active drugs are now being tested, including statins, which are commonly used for treating hypercholesterolemia. Memantine, which is the new one, which is used for trying to prevent and treat cognitive defect, and also a group of drugs that are activators of the enzyme pyruvate kinase, which actually ameliorates the metabolism of the red cell, and which are very promising drugs. Now, in front of such a complexity of the pathophysiological mechanism, it is likely that only one drug will not be the solution, you know, and that a multimodal therapy will be the future, meaning associating drugs which address, for instance, vasculopathy, inflammation, red blood cell dehydration, or other general aspect of SCD pathophysiology. In addition or not with hydroxyurea. But the problem in trying to develop such a multi-drug approach is that the clinical assays are mostly funded by the manufacturer of the drugs, you know. And trying to do multi-drug assays would mean that you associate different manufacturers who actually are competitors, you know, to treat the patient. So this is some kind of an obstacle that we have to go over to develop new procedures. Now, if we talk about hydroxyurea, I will go into a little bit of details, because this is the perfect example of a drug with effect on multiple mechanisms that is now proven as the most effective drug in preventing complications of sickle cell disease, in particular painful crisis, and diminish the need for transfusion. And hydroxyurea is active because it is pleiotropic in its action. It's act, of course, of hemoglobin F induction, and this is what it was used for the first time. But it is also an anti-adhesive drug by diminishing the expression of some adhesive properties of the red cells and the endothelium. It acts on the rheology, that is regulation of the blood flow. It is a nitric oxide donor. It is a myelosuppressive drug that reduces the level of neutrophils, which are very deleterious in sickle cell disease, and it is an antioxidant drug. So now we have, as was said by Professor Calago, a single mutation in but a highly variable clinical presentation. Sickle cell disease is notoriously characterized by variable clinical outcomes. Some patients suffer life-threatening complications during childhood, where others live relatively symptom-free into the old age. The number of complications here is very high, as we already mentioned several times. So in the era of precision medicine, it would be crucial to identify markers of severity or susceptibility profiles in order to stratify different groups of patients for whom specific surveillance or treatment could be instituted. Now, there are known modifiers of the phenotypic diversity, as mentioned by Professor Zago, together with several other groups in the world we have contributed to this description. First of all, there are genetic modifiers, including the gene environment of the sickle cell mutation, which are called the haplotypes. The main modifiers are genetic modifiers that affect the level of hemoglobin F. The more hemoglobin F the patient expresses, the less severe is the disease. And this is illustrated here on this panel, which shows mortality curves of patients with low hemoglobin F. As you see, the survival drops sharply. And here, patients with a high level of hemoglobin F, in which survival is much more longer. Also, the third type of genetic modifiers are the number of alpha genes, which are also called alpha thalassemia, so co-inherited alpha thalassemia, and hemoglobins gives rise to less severe disease. But genetic modifiers do not explain everything. There are non-genetic modifiers, including the climate, also living the quality of air, and living habits like smoking and so on. So if we concentrate on the genetic modifier of the hemoglobin F level, there was a whole genome study that identified 3 different loci which account for most of the genetic variability of hemoglobin F expression. 2 of them have been described previously, one by Labi, which was my mentor and who was cited by Professor Zago. The second one was described by Swilei Thine, but this one here, affecting the gene called BCL11A, was a discovery which was brought up by this genome-wide study. And the importance of this site is that it led to the discovery of BCL11A as a major regulator of hemoglobin F to adult hemoglobin. Hemoglobin A in the normal case, hemoglobin S in the case of the sickle patient. And nowadays, deletion, alteration of the BCL11A erythroid enhancer by gene editing has become a major target by gene editing for the universal treatment of sickle cell disease and beta thalassemia. If we look now at the specific other complication of sickle cell disease, there have been numerous candidate genes which have been reported to as linked to organ-specific complication, but only 3 of them which are illustrated here on the left part of the slide, but 3 of them only have been replicated. I will not go into the details, but these 2 actually have a relative relevance to the management of sickle cell patients. The conclusion of that part of the talk is that predictive marker in precision medicine are scarce. To date, there is no genetic, biological, paraclinical marker that has been validated to define individual patient profiles and guide treatment decision. There is one exception, which is very, very important, which is the functional exploration, which is called transcranial Doppler, which is the only validated hemodynamic marker currently used to guide treatment, and that part is for stroke prevention by transfusion, maybe by a hydroxyurea. So reliable predictive prognostic markers are still an urgent need for precision medicine, that is a treatment that is adapted of a specific patient. Are we going toward a cure of sickle cell disease? Well, yes. Some procedures have been described and utilized as hematopoietic stem cell transplantation, HSTCT. It is the historical curative option, increasingly accessible with alternative donor sources and reduced toxicity conditioning. And the other one, which everybody talks about, which is gene therapy, which is a donor-independent curative approach that opens door to a broader eligibility, hopefully. This is just a timeline, also a key milestones in the use of sickle cell, of bone marrow transplant, HSCT in sickle cell disease. All started in 1984, where an allogenic transplant has been done in a sickle cell patient for treating his leukemia. Leukemia was cured, but sickle cell disease was cured as well. Okay? Then you have the first transplants for specifically to treat sickle cell disease, which were performed in Belgium in 1988. Then the large multi-centers series in the US and also in Europe and France in particular. And in 2011, there was the first successful HSCT for sickle cell disease in Nigeria. That is a low-income country where the disease is the most prevalent. I wanted to, up to date, there are 7 countries over the 54 African countries in which HSCT has been performed, including in Nigeria, as I mentioned, but also Tanzania in sub-Saharan Africa. I wanted to place the Brazil into that history because it is important and it was very innovative. In Ribeirão Preto, Giulio Voltarelli performed the first bone marrow transplant in 2003, you know, at the Centro de Terapia Celular in Ribeirão Preto, together with Linda Simos, who took over and continued to treat the patient to attain very large series. To treat, numbers are difficult to appreciate, but it is estimated that about 6,000 sickle cell disease patients have been transplanted worldwide. Now, if we come to maybe what is the future, I don't know, gene therapy. there are also milestones. Here you have the first allogenic transplant, which was contemporary to hydroxyurea, I already mentioned. And then we had to wait for the early 2000 years to have gene therapy that used gene transplant, gene transfer, meaning to bring the therapeutic gene into the hematopoietic stem cells of the patient. But this was a ex vivo, very heavy procedure, you know, to collect the stem cells from the patient, transform them in vitro to re-inject them to the patient. So the different examples are here in blue. One should say that one of the pioneering team in this type of gene therapy was that of Cavazzana in Paris at the Imagine Institute, sorry. Then, as I said, there was this discovery of the BCL1 gene. So some of the transfer procedures were used to extinguish the expression of the BCL1 gene. This was done here in green. This is illustrated. And finally, you may have heard about the possibility of editing the genome, meaning changing bases or removing part of the DNA. And the first experiment trial in vivo has been conducted in that direction. So this is a schematic approach to the gene therapy procedure. The first one to be used were ex vivo procedure, which as I described, you collect the stem cells of a patient, you transform them in the lab, so this is what it's called ex vivo, and then you do a ablating procedure in the patient, and you re-inject the cells into the patient. This is a very heavy procedure. And the hope now is to have in vivo procedure in which you inject the gene of therapeutic interest, and that gene will find the hematopoietic stem cell of the recipient, and then these cells will develop and bring the therapeutic effect. I will not go into the detail, but let's say that the two goals right now of gene therapy is either to express a normal beta gene or an anti-cycling beta gene or derivative, or to increase hemoglobin F production, because you've seen the protective effect of hemoglobin F in sickle cell disease. I will not go into these details because I've seen most of them. The only interesting things to compare bone marrow transplant and gene therapy is that in bone marrow transplant you need a related donor, you know, and it is so very often difficult to find. So a lot of patients that would benefit from stem cell transplantation do not have a donor. Whereas in gene therapy, you are using the cells of the patient that you transform, and so there is no problem of finding a donor. So I will conclude here. The conclusion is, in my mind, but we may discuss that, resumed in 2 words: progress and affordability. We know to need better. We know to refine the epidemiology of sickle cell disease to target priority interventions, area of priority interventions, particularly in Africa and low-income countries. We need to extend newborn screening, and a newborn screening that is linked to comprehensive care programs. Second, we aim at treating better, and also very importantly, at treating all patients. So we need to advance in our pathophysiology research to fuel affordable drug repurposing. We need to make hydroxyurea universally available in low-income countries in particular. We need to develop safe and affordable gene therapy with the hope that affordable in vivo gene therapy procedure can be practical and extended to all the patients, availability of all the patients. And the final comment in blue, which I did not address, but which is, to my mind, extremely important, is to build capacity. It doesn't need to understand everything if you don't have the capacity to express and to use your knowledge. So you need to invest everywhere in training and education in the workers in the health field, doctors and paramedics. And you need also to have action to raise awareness among decision makers and funders. And also, I should mention, to the general population, because the general population very often, even in low-income countries where the incidence of sickle cell disease is important, do not know about sickle cell disease or stigmatize the population affected with sickle cell disease. That's it, my friend. Merci. Thank you. Obrigado.
Thank you very much, Professor Elion. Eu gostaria agora, depois da apresentação, de abrir para perguntas da plateia. Quem quiser fazer pergunta em português, inglês, francês ou italiano.
Chinês.
Isso, ou chinês, ou mandarim. Então, eu vou agrupar de 2 a 3 perguntas e aí a gente coloca o professor Elion responder. Por favor.
Posso?
Okay, thank you so much, Professor, for the talk. John Table from FMRP, USP. I wanted to comment on the landscape of repurposed drug in terms of sickle cell disease and as well as the combination of this. What's the future like in this scenario?
Jacques, in your last slide, you pointed the principal aspects you see as necessary for progress and affordability in treating this disease. But you didn't include bone marrow transplantation. So I wish to ask you if you see this as an important tool still. And I know that there are programs here in Brazil using transplantation, hematopoietic cell transplantation. I know that in Ribeirão Preto this is a going on program. So perhaps someone would wish to comment, and I'd like to
see your opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Jacques, for this lecture that you presented for us. Actually, I'm Teresa Gomes. I'm a general practitioner in Angola, and I'm also professor at the University of Medical Sciences in Angola. And my question is directly to Professor. Since you, the professor, start working on sickle cell disease, what have been your greatest challenges, and in your opinion, what measures could be taken to improve the cure and management of this condition? And to say that as an Angolan, you presented here that Nigeria has the most prevalence of persons carrying of this condition, and the second one is DRC. And I think the second or the third, the second one, yes. And something important is the DRC, or Angolan borders DRC, in north of Angola, and I'm from north of Angola, Cabinda city, and the problem is we have so many persons that are, or the migration rates from DRC to Angola is so high, and the problem is the newborn screening of this condition starts only in 2014. But molecular tests is the big problem in Angola, even all Africa. And I don't know what professor recommended to us to improve the newborn screening in Africa in general. Thanks.
Obrigado. Temos mais uma pergunta? Por favor.
Bom dia a todos. Meu nome é Evaristo. Eu sou da Associação de Anemia Falciforme de São Paulo. E a minha fala e a minha pergunta, ela vem lá da periferia, onde estão as maiorias dos doentes com anemia falciforme. Nós não somos um país pobre. Nossa economia ela é coletiva, mas a distribuição dessa economia que não é coletiva. Mas nós temos o SUS aqui, que supera alguns países ricos. E, professor, eu quero agradecer, porque eu acho que a sua explanação deu para trazer para nós, talvez até uma cura para o nosso problema de anemia falciforme aqui no Brasil. Porque a gente tem uma relação que não vem da academia, porque o sistema de saúde nosso brasileiro ele tem um outro olhar para o traço. E a gente entende que o traço é um reprodutor da doença. A minha pergunta, e eu gostei de ouvir o doutor falar, a minha pergunta, e eu gostei de ouvir o doutor falar, é a relação da acessibilidade. Porque nas associações de anemia falciforme, nós ensinamos os pacientes a conviver com a anemia falciforme. Eles nem pensam em cura. E o finalzinho da sua fala, o senhor trouxe a questão da disponibilidade universal e da questão da acessibilidade, que eu acho que isso é o que precisa no Brasil, porque a gente consegue ser referência em HIV no mundo e a gente tem o mesmo sistema de saúde que não acontece o mesmo com a anemia falciforme. Essa é a minha pergunta. Muito obrigado. Estou feliz em ouvi-lo.
Muito obrigado. Obrigado, Evaristo, pelas perguntas. Jacques. So you have 4 questions? Okay.
Evaristo, I'm not sure I understood all of your question, and but you mentioned the comparison between HIV and sickle cell disease, and the only a huge effort, as you very well know, has been done to try to prevent HIV dissemination and to promote, in particularly, screening of HIV persons and newborns. And the only thing that I would like to say, HIV is not my field, but in Uganda, which I visited, I have seen the use of the network for HIV detection and HIV prevention that has been set up with a lot of money, you know, and which works rather well from what I can say. I'm not from Uganda, as you imagine, but this network that has been established for HIV prevention, meaning, you know, taking samples from the newborns, taking samples from the general population, you know, sometimes on motorbikes, going to the center where the diagnosis will be made. The colleagues working on SCD in Uganda have used this whole strategy and system which had been put in place for HIV to do screening for sickle cell disease. So what I'm meaning is that there is a general applications, you know, and there should be a higher integration and cooperation between the different programs of detection and prevention of the diseases in general. And the problem is that sometimes, it was not the case in Uganda, but sometimes they work totally differently, you know, and separately. And up to now, you know, there has been a lot of money invested in HIV prevention and detection, and very few to sickle cell disease detection and prevention. And the fact that in Uganda, they succeeded to reunite, you know, this two systems was a great achievement. And now there is universal screening for sickle cell disease in Uganda. Sorry if I missed some other parts of your question, but that was one aspect. Angola, I'm glad Angola is here. I've been to Luanda, and I've been to the Democratic Republic of Congo as well. And you're mentioning immigration. Immigration, as you've seen, and I mentioned it mostly for Europe, but immigration exists also in Africa, obviously. And I think in terms of sickle cell disease, you have to establish prevention and most importantly, identifications of the patients who are carrying the sickle gene, you know. And so this can be done. This is always a problem of money, you know. How do you check the immigrants? I'm sure, very unfortunately, that the immigrants from RDC in Uganda do not have a medical checkup before they come to Angola. But actually, when they look for a job or something, maybe that could be an occasion, or maybe when they have children, you know, when the woman delivers in a hospital. This is an immigrant woman, I mean. This is an occasion to screen the woman, to screen the newborn, of course, but to extend the screening to the family and the friends and comrades of the people who have immigrated. And what I think also is that the point of care tests, you know, that you can do in matters of maybe, well, less than 1 hour, but the whole procedure, you know, takes about 1 hour, might be very useful because sometimes when you use the classical techniques, you know, in which you collect a sample, then the samples are referred to a reference lab who can do the test, and so on. The time the result of the test come, well, the guy who was checked has disappeared, you know. You know as well as I do that in some African countries, not all the African countries, but there is no address, you know. So how to find the guy? I was very innocent, you know, when everybody had a mobile phone, and I said when they go to the hospital or to the place where they are tested, they have a mobile phone and they leave a number to which you can tell them about the result and the test and tell them come back to the hospital and so on. But this is not true because they change the PIN card, you know, in the phone every once in a while, very often actually. That's the first point. Second point is they are illegal immigrants, and if you tell them you should come to the hospital, they say, to the hospital or to the police? Or the police will be at the hospital? I don't know. So I don't know if I answered your question. It is a very difficult problem, and I personally have no solution for that. Does that answer your question, or? Sorry.
The first question was the
my challenge.
Yep.
My personal challenge.
No. What is the most challenge that you find when you start? In the life you are working on this condition. The most challenges that professor has with this condition right now, maybe in some specific country, I don't know exactly.
The challenge.
Yes, professor.
Well, I think really the challenge is education and training. I didn't address that in my talk. I just mentioned it at the last in the last slide. But you should put and I have participated to some of this effort very modestly, but you should train medical students, nurses, all the paramedics about what sickle cell disease is, because even though some of them live in a country with high incidence, you know, in the mind of many people is, oh, you have a sickle cell patient, newborn. He's going to die within 2 years, 4 years, you know. And this is true in some regions of Africa. So you too should teach these people, and you should train them. Some of them also will work in large cities where awareness of the disease is present, but some of them will work in very small villages, you know, where this is the image of sickle cell disease. The baby is gonna die very soon, you know. Make another one, change partner. Okay? So training, I think, and education, and also increase the awareness of the general population. And in the end, this should go up to the deciders, you know, and these deciders, it's up to them, you know, to establish comprehensive program, and to spend money. I know they have a lot of money problems, but this should be considered as one priority. One of the priorities, because there are so many priorities.
Good morning. Good morning.
There is one final
Professor.
response to Professor Zago, yeah.
Okay.
On the transplantation, yeah.
There is a question. There was a question about bone marrow transplant. But I'm sure people in the audience could react to this and to give the experience of the Brazilian program. As I mentioned, everything started in Ribeirão Preto, but I forgot the exact date. But now SUS has included the bone marrow transplant for sickle cell disease into its program. So I think that prices will decrease for the bone marrow transplant, and there are a lot of people, working with, collaborating and working in developed countries who are working on that. But still, at the present time, they are very, very high and unaffordable for low-income countries. It's very nice to say in Angola we have, not in Angola, sorry, in Nigeria we have done a bone marrow transplant. Good. You made the first page of the newspaper in Angola and a short note in the European or American newspapers, but that's it. To my knowledge, there is no comprehensive reflection on how to establish an affordable and sustainable program in the low-income countries. But I would be very happy to hear about the comments of the people here in Brazil.
Good morning, Professor.
Sorry.
I
Yeah.
would.
Please,
Sorry?
go ahead. Por favor.
Good morning, Professor. Bom dia a todos. I'm not sure about which language to choose. Good morning, Professor. Not so much better. Maybe I should use maybe Portuguese to that audience, okay? Eu gostaria de fazer uma pergunta, mas gostaria também de agradecer pela relevância do trabalho apresentado, né? Acho que todos concordam aqui a respeito da relevância. Eu gostaria de saber do senhor, porque a gente se encontra em um país, eu acho que bastante desigual, né? Com relação ao recorte racial. Isso é um fato dado aqui no Brasil hoje. E a respeito de como o estudo se dá, eu acho que é uma questão teórica importante. Contudo, eu acho que a gente ainda tem, junto disso, a questão do preconceito racial que acontece no Brasil. E essas pautas, eu acho que elas são levadas cada vez mais dentro das universidades e dos meios acadêmicos. Eu gostaria de saber do senhor a respeito de quais são as diferenças que o senhor observou durante esse trajeto, porque foram feitas pesquisas em diversos países do mundo. E quando se fala a respeito dessa perspectiva de colocar verbas para uma questão de saúde pública, porém, num país hoje com uma divisão racial bastante importante, que é o Brasil, porque eu entendo que talvez o investimento, talvez, né, é algo que eu não tenho dados para poder dizer a respeito disso, não seja tão grande, porque trata-se da população preta hoje do país. Isso é um assunto delicado, eu acho, né? E eu gostaria de saber o quanto que desse investimento, não só no sentido da tecnologia em si ou do estudo acadêmico em si, mas o quanto que desse investimento tenha que ser para sensibilização e para questões voltadas para a consciência racial, letramento racial e uma maior consciência mesmo a respeito da diversidade que a gente vive no país hoje.
Well, your question is very crucial. And actually, it is coming to Brazil that I not discovered, but realized how intense this problem can be. And, well, I don't think it has to be not solved, but to make any suggestion by somebody coming from outside Brazil. But what I would like to say is, to a lesser extent, this problem exists everywhere. And I will give you some French examples, because this is what I know, you know. In France, and now in many other countries, I don't know if it exists in Brazil, we have a program led by Patients Association, which is called the Telethon, which is to raise funding. You know, every year they have one day. Well, you can give money all the year around, but there is one day in which they make big explanations about the disease and try to increase the awareness of the people and so on. And when the telethon started, you know, working in France, working on sickle cell disease, you know, and looking at the show that they were making on the TV, they never would show a sickle cell patient. Why? Because it was much better in their mind, you know, to show a little child in a wheeling chair, you know, I mean, a white, real French child in a wheelchair, than a black sickle cell patient who looked normal, you know. Sickle cell patients, they do look normal. Maybe they are a little bit thin, some of them. That's it. You don't see the disease. And they suffer, as you know, from the disease very, very deeply. But it is a hidden disease, you know, that is difficult to explain to the general population, in which the majority of the people are white people. Second example, still in the telethon story. When you are a researcher, you know, on any type of medical field, you need funding. You can get some funding from the public funds, of course, but you rely also on some additional funding. So when the telethon started, they said, our plan is to take care of all the patients with genetic diseases, particularly myopathies at the time, but all of them, you know, they are all welcome, we will give money. They got a lot of money, you know, for the fund. And I applied several times. And my subject was sickle cell disease, so I applied on project on sickle cell disease. I never got €1 from the telethon, you know. And I have the modesty to say that it was not because of, not totally because of the quality of my project. This new pediatric hospital, Robert Debré, is located in the northeast part of Paris, which is one of the poorest part of the city, whereas the west and southwest part of the city is the richest part of the city, and where is located a very famous in France hospital, which is called Necker Enfants Malades, and where the gene therapy experiments were done, and a lot of other works, but these are the more seeing. So when this hospital opened, my new hospital in the northeast of Paris, poorest part of the city, very soon we were submerged by the number of urgent cases. You know, the emergency ward was full. For two reasons, because this poor population has no family doctor, you know, and they come to the hospital, not to the doctor, okay? And so it was so submerged by the new patients at the emergency ward that some of the patients were transferred to this other hospital I mentioned in the richest part of the city. And once, I remember that very well, the lady from who was in charge of this ward in the richest hospital part of Paris said, "But why are you sending us always black patients? You are selecting them, you know. You don't want to keep them over there in your new hospital, and you send them to us." This wasn't true, of course. This was not the truth. The truth was that the population around our hospital had very much at largest black population than the other one in Paris. The other one, only the sons of the dictators of Black Africa were coming, you know, the ladies to deliver baby and the babies to be taken care of. So that's my answer. Of course, it is totally partial. I'm not living in Brazil. When I came to Brazil, I understood the intensity of the problem that you were mentioning. And that was very interesting for me to think about that, you know, to think about racial discrimination in health. This is something I had not really thought about very profoundly. But I have no answer to that. But your question raises a very important problem that should be an ease, I know, a problem of discussion and reflection within the Brazilian society.
Obrigado. Nós temos as últimas 3 perguntas. Eu vou pedir para vocês serem bastante sucintos por conta do tempo.
Ok, obrigado, professor. Eu vou tentar ser sucinto. Good morning, Professor Jacques Elion. Thank you very much for sharing your experience in sickle cell disease with us. And I will try to be brief, but I'm not sure I can. Let's see. So, curative therapies are distant from many patients with sickle cell disease. It's not going to be something real in Brazil, for example, for at least many decades yet. So it's very delicate to say this, but many patients are going to have premature deaths, although they have treatment. For example, if we talk about São Paulo, which has a better standard care for patients with sickle cell disease compared to other regions for Brazil, you will find patients that are clinically similar, but still they evolve differently. In the end, some die earlier, some die later. And I was thinking that, is there a way to maybe calculate an inflection point in which you could look at a patient throughout many different clinical aspects, and you could perhaps aggressively attack into many flanks of the disease, and perhaps expand the life expectancy from these patients. I don't know, I was just thinking that we lack biomarkers for death yet.
Okay, outra pergunta aqui. We're going to do 3 and then to finish, to conclude, sorry. Por favor.
Bom dia, eu sou Berenice Kikuchi, presidente da Associação de Anemia Falciforme do Estado de São Paulo. Parabenizo pelo evento e encontrar o doutor Zagon aqui, porque em 96 nós estávamos lá no Ministério da Saúde, reivindicando uma atenção qualificada à anemia falciforme. E parabenizar por esse espaço também, para que ele seja aberto para os movimentos sociais também. Porque tudo que está no SUS, desde a penicilina oral, porque antes era injetável, ao transplante de medula, a luta é do movimento social. Então, é muito importante que essa plateia saiba que o SUS só existe no Brasil. Nenhum país paga medicações tão caras como o Brasil paga. E todas as medicações de alto custo estão no SUS, obra do movimento social no qual a Associação de Anemia Falciforme foi pioneira, inclusive na inclusão no teste do pezinho. E cada política pública leva entre 6 e 7 anos para a gente incluir. Isso foi o que aconteceu com o teste do pezinho. Nós começamos em 97 a reivindicar e conseguimos em 2001, em 12 estados. E o último estado, Rondônia, foi incluído em 2014. Então, políticas públicas não se faz de um dia para a noite. Então, é muito importante o movimento social. A gente está com uma interação com o pessoal de Angola, Luanda, e lá, realmente, eles não têm nada. Eu publiquei recentemente uma pesquisa que foi feita com um grupo de pessoas de Angola. Eles não sabem o que é eletroforese. A população com a doença não sabe. Eles não sabem o que é hidroxiureia. Eles não têm acesso à penicilina. Então, quer dizer, se a gente está discutindo, a gente tem que pensar também que a experiência do Brasil foi levada para países, eu fiz parte desse primeiro grupo, só que em Angola veio as pessoas para serem capacitadas no Brasil, mas não vingou porque o governo precisa estar junto, o governo do país. E eles não queriam comprar os insumos. Se eles não compram os insumos, o governo do Brasil não pode fazer aquilo que é missão deles. Então, é muito importante que vocês saibam que o Brasil está, sim, bem avançado na questão da anemia falciforme. Tem, às vezes, discrepâncias, sim, de um lugar para outro. Mas nós estamos aqui como organização social, somando esforços com pesquisadores, com pessoas interessadas em avançar, para que a gente continue garantindo qualidade na assistência. Obrigada.
Muito obrigado, Berenice. A última pergunta.
Obrigada. Então, bom dia a todas as pessoas que estão aqui no auditório. Eu sou Ana Luísa, eu sou docente da Escola de Enfermagem da USP. Obrigada, professor. Foi uma fala muito especial. Nós nos encontramos, né, mais cedo no elevador. Mas o que eu gostaria de saber, assim, toda a abordagem é feita a partir do rastreamento e, obviamente, da identificação dos portadores e dos doentes. Mas qual que seria o papel da saúde pré-concepcional? Então, esse aconselhamento pré-concepcional, ele teria algum valor? E qual seria, então, a abordagem antes que a concepção ocorra? Obrigada.
Jacques. Obrigado, professora. No, it's yours.
Well, there are several interventions of very broad and different subjects. To answer to the first question, which was, is there a threshold in which you can say when patient will go bad and we should be more aggressive? This is what I said. We are all looking for that. And At this moment, there is no real definition of such a threshold, except for transcranial Doppler, in which the patient are at very high risk of neurological complications and can be taken care of very, very effectively by transfusion or maybe by some hydroxyurea treatment, which are now being developed. To the lady who was representing the patients' associations, thank you for your intervention, because it is absolutely crucial. And what is crucial also is the collaboration with the medical actors and the patients. I myself have collaborated with a lot of associations in France and with some others in Black Africa. And I cannot but say that my appreciation to their action. It was not really in the purpose of my talk today to develop the impact of this association. As you said, the impact of the Brazilian association, together with the social movement concerned by health problem in Brazil, have been fundamental. They have been fundamental, as have been the impact of Black African social movement, which I mentioned. I'm sorry I didn't mention the Brazilian movement, but I've learned a lot, and I do remember, that was a long time ago, mentioning in my presentation the history of the interaction and the action of the Patients Association to develop the programs. Of course, in every country, and in Brazil as well, the funding and the awareness of the deciders, of the political people, of the responsible of the health program has up and downs. I said that, to my mind, the establishment of the national newborn screening in Brazil, which was developed in 4 years, between 2010 and 2014, as far as I remember, and that was a real big achievement. I don't know of any other countries in which such an achievement has been reached. But I realize very well from what I see that this program has up and downs, you know. And even though it is not perfect, but really exemplary in terms of social medicine and advances in global health locally in Brazil, this can still be an example. And I think the role of the association that you mentioned is continuously, you know, to go to the deciders and to the people who can manage fund to specific programs, and to say, hey, you had said this is how it was working. This is not the case anymore. You have to go up again and take your action again. Also, another problem that you mentioned, which is very, very important, and I think which was mentioned by another intervenant in the audience, is the fact that the population is very unaware of what sickle cell disease is. Even that sickle cell exists, you know. And in that matter, This is why I talked at the very end, I'm sorry, of my talk about training and education. And the patients associations are taking a great, great, great part in education. Education of the general population, raising the awareness about what this disease is and what can be done, you know. Because we are talking about hematopoietic stem cell transplant, it is €1 million. I don't know how it translates in Brazilian reals.
It's cheaper, yeah.
Cheaper? All right. Good. but anyway, it's extremely expensive for a single patient. And so I think that really what changed the world of sickle cell disease is newborn screening and early care and prevention of the severe complications. And in particular, the one that comes in mind is the penicillin prophylaxis of infections, because most of the children under 5 were dying of infection and are still dying of infections, even in countries where there are programs of so-called national programs of sickle cell disease, and when these programs are found only in big cities and not in the country, in the smaller cities or even villages. So once again, thank you to the association. They are absolutely crucial, you know, to the awareness and to the action that can be done via the political. You said you went to the Ministry of Health, political deciders and fund providers. Thank you again. And we should collaborate, and we are collaborating. I know, you cited Professor Zago, who went along with you at the Ministry of Health of Brazil.
Bom, eu queria agradecer muito a presença... Ah, sim, da Ana Luísa, perdão. On the preconception...
Oh, yeah. Yes. That's a very, very complicated issue.
In 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Well, once again, this raises the question of awareness, you know, of what sickle cell disease is. In France and in, well, I'm sure in Brazil as well, you have counseling, genetic counseling, and so on. There are some countries in which prenatal diagnosis is allowed and is performed for sickle cell disease. I've done a lot of genetic consultation, not premarital, but during early pregnancy of women with sickle cell disease. It's difficult. First of all, only the woman come. The father doesn't exist. You know, he's away or something like that. And prenatal counseling or prenuptial counseling should be involving the couple. Father, mother, new weds, both of them, you know. There are some countries, in particular in the Middle East, where hemoglobin electrophoresis is required as one of the prenuptial tests. But the result is given to the couple, but the result is not given to legal authority that could... the result is given to the couple, and very, very often the couple refers to the religious authority of the religion they belong to. You know, So a part of the population that should be aware and informed about sickle cell disease is certainly the responsible of different churches or other religions, you know, because they have a very important role to play. For instance, the only thing I can think of is the Muslim population in France, to which sometimes I was giving genetic counseling. And you realize that between what the religion really says and what is known by the high representatives of this religion is different from what is known from the lay people. I personally went to have an interview with the chief of the mosque in Paris, and we discussed about all of this prenuptial counseling and even prenatal diagnosis. Is it possible within the religion, or is it not? And I think this is very important. And in countries in which pre-hemoglobin electrophoresis, meaning screening of the S trait in newlywed or before even marriage, in this part of the world where this is prescribed, the religious people have taken a great role in counseling and the decision that is made by the future couple or just new wed couple.
Ok. Então, agora, muito obrigado à presença de todos vocês por essa discussão. Acho que mostrou essa relevância da ciência que vai muito além do laboratório e tem aspectos sociais extremamente significativos. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Jacques. Bom final de semana e bom final de sexta a todos.
Muito obrigado.
Queria agradecer a presença de todos, reforçar o convite para virem novamente na FAPESP na próxima última sexta-feira do mês, vai ser dia 28 de agosto, onde a gente vai ter uma conferência sobre computação quântica, um outro tema extremamente relevante, que talvez até possa ajudar a encontrar soluções para o problema que a gente discutiu hoje. Como vocês veem, a gente tem um debate bastante rico e qualificado, e eu costumo terminar essa conferência agradecendo vocês pela presença e estimulando-os a voltar e trazer pelo menos mais um acompanhante, para a gente ter um auditório ainda mais cheio e mais diversidade. Muito obrigado.